Morning guys. Thanks for coming along. If you're not ready, take a seat. Those of you that don't know us, this is TK. I'm Cam, his son. We're from TK Offshore Fishing. Our masterclass today is going to be on reading the signs. So what you're looking at to find your fish. We're going to start off with sort of your traditional techniques, and then we'll start rolling in to what TK's been doing for 40 years sort of thing, looking at your more in-depth side of things, your sea height anomalies, your upwellings, and all your sea surface temps and stuff like that. But we'll start off with a little bit of a background. As I said, I'm Cam. I'm TK's son. I've been in and around the fishing industry without being a commercial fisherman my whole life, essentially, as you do with a dad that's been commercial fishing for 45 years. My first job, which is technically slave labor, and I'm still
Yes,
a little bit annoyed about it. I was about 6 years old, working in the garage at home, crimping all of Dad's commercial fishing gear. But it sort of fueled the love for fishing that I've got that's taken me right through from a little child right through to these days now, where I get to do this as a full-time job without having to be a commercial fisherman, which is epic.
Yeah.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
But yeah, my fondest memories are Dad coming into Whangamata with his commercial fishing boat, and me and all my mates from school run down with our tiny little sprat rods and are fishing with bits of bread and stuff like that off the back of Dad's commercial fishing boats. And you'd kind of think that after 15, 16 days at sea, the last thing you want to do is go fishing again. But as always, Dad was straight into it. He's out there with a fishing rod with us.
Yeah.
Stealing bait out of the bait freezers and stuff like that for us to go fishing with. And yeah, that's sort of my background. So I've been well and truly thrown into the industry and have never looked back.
And the cool thing is that the kids that used to come down from Whangamata school, we'd come down to the boat after school. Cam's still fishing with those same guys today. So
Yeah, we're still stealing your marks.
and still stealing my marks, yeah. So my background, my grandfather was a crayfisherman out of Whangamata in the 50s and 60s. Dad built the fish shop on the wharf, the fish market on the wharf in Tauranga there, so I sort of grew up in that environment as well. I tried to get away from fishing. I did an apprenticeship as a builder, but soon got drawn back into it. So I've been fishing since 1982. Started off snapper longlining out of Whangamata. Within a decade, I was offshore doing the blue nose and half hooker, and I've sort of been offshore ever since doing tuna and swordfish and that sort of thing. So I've spent over 40 years doing it now. A normal year is 250 to 280 days a year at sea. So I essentially live at sea and come into reprovision and go back to sea. So what we'd like to do today, it's been an incredible game fishing season. So we've seen a lot of fishers that don't traditionally chase game fish, that have been out and caught their first yellowfin this season, that sort of thing. So what we'd like to do is go over those fundamental basics. What we find in the modern world these days is a lot of guys go out to sea and they've got their phone in their hand and look at Facebook. We want to sort of show you guys that the ocean will show you the signs. You don't need all the latest electronics to find game fish. There's signs that the ocean will show you if you know how to read those signs, and even the fundamental basics like birds and dolphins. There's different mannerisms that they have that we'd like to sort of walk you through just to remind you of those techniques, and then we'll get into some more technical stuff on the currents and why we're looking at where the bait is and that sort of thing. So I'll get you to kick off, Cam, with the fundamentals.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll start off with the traditional techniques. May seem pretty basic, but a lot of people ignore these. They've been techniques that people have been using for hundreds of years for a reason. It can look pretty basic, but when we start going into the more complex stuff, you'll see how all of that starts to tie back in on why the fish are there, why the birds are there, dolphins, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'll kick off with your dolphins and whales. Everyone knows that dolphins chase fish, all that sort of stuff. Same with the whales, but they've got a few different little tendencies and stuff like that there. If your dolphins, like in the video, are playing around on the bow of your boat, you see them jumping and having fun and stuff like that, they've already fed. There's no point in chasing them. Stay in that area. The dolphins, again, are there for a reason. They're insanely good hunters. But if they're mucking around like that and it's sort of middle of the day, they've already fed. There's no point in chasing them. It's not until you see them beelining off in one direction, like in that photo there, that something's not, they've noticed something, they've noticed a ball of bait, they've noticed a bit of action and stuff like that. when they start beelining off in that one direction, that's when you want to turn and start chasing them.
Yep.
They're insanely in-tune hunters, and like we've had a ridiculous amount off the Bay of Plenty this year, off the Coromandel. Again, the yellowfin tuna run that we've had off there has been absolutely ridiculous. The vast majority of people that have never caught them before have caught them purely on, we've had massive bust-ups of birds, dolphins, all sorts of stuff just hitting these areas, and that's bringing the tuna in as well.
Yep.
We found quite often with your dolphins and stuff like that, the tuna are actually following behind them as well.
Yep.
So you'll be tying your lures and stuff like that, following a pot of dolphin, and all of a sudden a lure's going off behind you. So just because they're cycling off in one direction, don't pull your lures in. You're never going to catch a fish if you don't have a hook in the water. Just troll off in that direction. Sooner or later, you're going to come across what they were chasing down.
The other thing is, when you see the dolphins, you know, they're very effective hunters. So when you see them playing around, once they start galloping off, and you'll see them all galloping off in a certain direction, don't think, oh my God, they're going to go for 10 or 15 miles. They're so efficient. They know where the bait's going to be. So if you see them start galloping off, it's actually worth chasing them because they're not going to be going far. You know, they're so efficient at what they do. You'll find they're only going to go a mile or two and they're back on the schools of fish. So it's well worth chasing them. You know, a lot of guys will give up thinking, oh, they're going to be galloping for miles. You know, if they're going from White Island, they're heading towards Mere. It's worth chasing them because they are on the bait at all times. They're so efficient at what they do. It's definitely worth hanging in there and following them. So
yeah, absolutely. That's the same with the birds.
Yeah.
They're not going to travel that far off their bait source. End of the day, same with all your pelagic species and stuff like that. They want to expend the least amount of energy as possible. Your birds are a funny one. Everyone knows what a bird workup is, especially if you fish the Hauraki Gulf and stuff like that for the snappers. It's some of the most entertaining fishing you're ever going to have. You'll be really surprised though, even once they're fed and they're all just sitting on the surface, there'll be 2 or 3 flying up above. They're usually your younger ones. They've been kicked off the water to go and look for more fish. But if you see a group of birds, again, off the Coromandel this year, we saw it heaps, your black mutton birds and stuff like that, sitting on the water, and if their heads are down in the water and all of them are just looking down, there's usually still bait sitting there, but it's too deep down for them to actually get to.
Yep.
The sheer amount of fish that we caught this year, just from seeing 3 or 4 birds sitting on the surface with their heads down, we'll just do a big arc, like 100 metres wide around them, and all of a sudden you'll pick up albies, you'll pick up skippies, yellowfin, all sorts. Yep. And it is just, the birds have driven those fish down, the dolphins haven't come in yet to push that bait back up. They're just sitting there staring down at the bait, waiting for it to get driven back up, waiting for those pelagics, waiting for the dolphins to come in. So don't ignore that surface sign.
And even when you're watching your birds diving, so look at the height they're diving from. So obviously if they're going up really high, it means the schools of baits are down quite deep. So keep an eye. Again, you've got to, don't go, oh, okay, there's just birds working there. Look at actually what they're doing. So if they're diving high, obviously your baits are down, your bait schools are down deep. So you can adjust your techniques. So right over down deep, let's try some jigging. If they're only doing shallow diving, that means the school's right on the surface. And again, something has driven that school to the surface. So even when they're sitting on the surface, you'll generally see an oar slick around it. It might even be scales around it. It's saying that they've just fed. But they'll always have a couple up circling, just keeping an eye on it. And you'll see all of a sudden the 2 or 3 birds that are up top, they start galloping somewhere. And again, generally it's associated with the dolphins. So the way we look at it is you're ticking boxes. So the more of these signs you can see, the more chance you're going to have of finding fish. So they'll tell you what's going on. You just got to keep an eye on them.
It's pretty ridiculous these days, like with the technology side of things as well. As much as it's a traditional technique, chasing birds, most boats these days, especially if you're game fishing, you're going to have your radars on the roof and stuff like that. We're lucky we've got a whole suite of Furuno stuff on there, and your modern radars will tell you how many birds are in the area, what direction they're flying in. You'll have your echo trail on where they've been and stuff like that. That's just the modern version of your traditional technique. You can read your bird sign from 5 miles away before you can even see them, sort of thing. So it's all just your new school stuff tying into that traditional stuff on, as basic as it seems. The birds are going to know where the bait are before you do. Yeah,
well, I mean, yes, okay, we've got amazing technology now, but for hundreds of years, well, thousands of years, but for hundreds of years, we've been targeting tuna and your pelagic species. Every boat in the fleet, and there's still some boats even now in Port Lincoln and that sort of thing in Australia, but every boat had a crow's nest, and there was a reason for that, you know, so every single boat had a crow's nest. It was normally the youngest deckhand was up at top, scouting, and they're still doing that today when they're doing the purse sailing for southern bluefin tuna off Port Lincoln. Again, we didn't have a technology in those days. I mean, when I first started, all I had was a compass.
Yep.
You know, it's changed that much. So you had to have those skills, and today, it's still, particularly in Port Lincoln, they've got the senior guys up there because it's so, they call it rippling. They're looking for the ripplers. It's still used to this day. I still use it. So it's more of a confirmation. Okay, I know my time zero system's told me where the bait is and that sort of thing. It's confirmation. So your technology has told you, righto, I'm going to go and look at this area off the back of White Island. We know there's been fish. Everything on my plotter is telling me that's where the fish is going to be. I've looked at the sea surface temp. But when you get out there, you still want these traditional techniques to say, righto, we know it's going to be within this 2 mile area where your birds and your dolphins and that sort of thing, and even your sea surface state is going to tell you exactly where they are. So they actually narrow it down for you. So it's really important to still utilise those old techniques. Put this thing down and look out the window. It's really important.
Let's be fair, the vast majority of people game fishing out of trailer boats still have that friend that likes to have a few beers and sit on the roof anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the same thing. There's always that one drunk guy sitting on a roof.
Yeah.
Rocking into your sea surface colour changes, it's a fun one. A lot of people get caught up on chasing the blue water.
Yep.
Again, I don't want to harp on too much about the tuna because straight after this, we've got Matt Watson talking about catching tuna. But we found a lot over summer. Like we were dropping our lures in at 35, 40 metres, heading out of Whangamata and picking up yellowfin tuna in 45 metres of water. And it was green, murky, horrible stuff. Don't get caught up on chasing that blue water, but it does have a massive effect on where your bigger pelagic fish are sitting, which is something TK's found out, especially in your coral sea and stuff like that over the years, is chasing those sea surface colour changes. So I'll get you to talk on about that one.
You'll see that particularly in the Bay of Plenty, and particularly around White Island. You'll see that colour change. And there's various theories on it, but as Cam was saying, don't get caught up in looking for that cobalt blue water. At the end of the day, you're looking for the bait. You know, you've got to understand that New Zealand is essentially the food larder for the whole West and South Pacific. So we've got the southern bluefin tuna. They're on their way up our coastline now. They've come from the Timor box over on the northwestern side of Australia, between Australia and Indonesia. They've come around here to put on fat, put on conditioning. We've got the yellowfin and the striped marlin, your big eye, your blue marlin. They've all come from the South Fiji Basin. They've come down to New Zealand specifically to put on condition and feed. So we're the food larder, and that's because we've got all the nutrients have flushed up from Antarctica. We've got a very vertical coastline as opposed to Australia, which has got a, you know, you can go at 200 miles and you're still in 200 or 300 metres. So we get the flush of nutrients coming to New Zealand. So we've got a high population of bait, and the reason they're here, they're not here to go and check out Hobbiton or check out the tourist destinations. They are solely here to feed and put on condition before they go back to the spawning ground. So, and you'll see it in our fish. So generally, November, December, we start seeing the yellowfin coming down from the South Fiji Basin. So they come down the Kermadec Trench. And a lot of people think, with the warm water coming down, the first yellowfin we're going to see are going to be off North Cape. They've actually come down the Kermadec Trench. So a lot of times the first yellowfin and striped marlin you see turn up off East Cape and off Whakatane. So, but when they get here, they are skinny and beaten up. Same with the bluefin you see off Fiordland in February when they first arrive. They've been spawning, they've been partying for the last 3 months. So when they get here, they haven't been feeding, they're starving. So they are here solely to feed. So the big thing about fishing for pelagic species in New Zealand is finding those schools of bait. Yeah. So when you get a colour change like that, essentially you've got two bodies of water merging. So you've generally got a colder body and a warmer body merging together. When you get those lines, and you'll generally see, we call it dunnage, floatage and dunnage. So you might be, the biggest curse I find is these things. You'll see these things floating along the edge, you'll see bits of rubbish, you'll see seaweed. Where I am in the Timor Sea at the moment, I'm seeing coconuts and coconut strands. I'm seeing abandoned Indonesian fishing gear, but they're all drifting in that line. So you've got a convergence zone there, and that's the key thing for finding bait in New Zealand is looking for those convergence zones. So when you see something like that, and there's various theories, some guys will say right over there on the warm side and then going into the cold side to feed. It changes from area to area. So what I see against the New Caledonia border in the Coral Sea is completely different to what's happening off the back of Whakatane, completely different to what's happening in the Hawke's Bay. So once you see something like that, you are definitely going to get action on that. Yeah. So you might even see the fish action on the surface on one side. When you see something like that, start zigzagging. The first thing you do is event it on your plotter, so you know where it is, and then start zigzagging backwards and forwards across that line, and you're soon going to find what side that bait's going to be hanging on, but they will be there. So again, that's another thing you've ticked. So you've got birds, you've got dolphins, and now you've got a colour change. Yeah. It's a convergence zone. So again, you're trying to find those schools of bait.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. Like you mentioned the dunnage and stuff like that before as well. You'll be surprised how many fish you'll find actually sitting under a massive clump of seaweed and stuff like that.
Oh, big time.
Creates its own almost little microclimate. All the little fish get drawn into it, especially over summer up in Northland, Bay of Plenty and stuff like that, and overseas, you mahi-mahi.
Yeah, yeah.
The sheer amount, like you flick a little lure and stuff like that. I was doing it over summer and got spooled God knows how many times, and I don't even know what was hitting them.
Yeah.
Flicking little soft baits in and around big clumps of seaweed and foam patches and stuff like that, and all of a sudden your reel's just screaming off. You don't know what you're hooked up to. Could be a shark, could be a tuna. But it's just amazing to see, like, even the smallest little patches of seaweed and stuff like that.
Yep,
it just brings in so much life. Which sort of somewhat brings us into the signs of upwellings and stuff like that as well, which can really trap a lot of people out, thinking that where these actual signs are is right on top of your seamounts and stuff like that, but your currents completely dictate to how far those upwellings push out. But it's essentially all of your nutrients getting ripped off the bottom. Once they hit that sign on the bottom of the ocean, they get skyrocketed up to the surface. Depending on the speed of your current, depends how far that surface sign is actually going to show. Those of you that have seen this sort of stuff before, you'll realize how easy it is to actually pick up where these upwellings are. Especially on like a glassy day, it'll be dead flat, and then you'll just see a little area of water that's got a bit of a ripple to it, and it's like almost like a patch of windy water sort of thing, but it's actually your upwellings getting ripped up from the bottom, and it's all that nutrients bubbling to the surface. You've experienced this heaps with the likes of your blue nose fishing and stuff like that when you're going around finding your seamounts, and same with the tuna fishing and stuff like that. But it's really noticeable on when you know what you're looking for. It's similar to the tide lines. You'll just see a patch of water that's just way rougher than the rest. It just looks really out of place.
Yeah. And you guys would have seen it. So if you've fished the Ranfurly Banks, if you've fished King Banks or Middlesex or up at the Wanganellas, you'll see it. So you'll get a tide change. You'll be on the Ranfurly Banks and you'll see it might be sort of a glassy calm, it might be a metre and a half swell. All of a sudden you'll see a big band of water and it's sort of standing up vertical and it's all waving and that sort of thing. That's your convergence zone or your upwelling. So what you've got to understand is that even if you've got a seamount that's in 700 metres, 900 metres, it's still going to create an upwelling. So the water, as you see in the diagram, that water's hitting that seamount, it's coming up. But what you've got to understand is if that's your seamount, by the time that upwelling gets up to the surface, that could be 4 or 5 miles away from the actual top of that seamount. And you'll see it, you'll even see it in a couple of metres of swell. You'll notice a difference in the wave faces. So you've really got to look for that because that's basically brought up all the nutrients. So that's the key part to it. It's bringing up all the nutrients. Wherever you get those nutrients on the surface, that generates your whole little ecosystem. So you get your phytoplankton going. Your phytoplankton is bringing in all your little gremlins. That's bringing in your bait fish, and that's bringing in your pelagic species. Again, you're looking for that bait. But you really want to, again, it's look out the bloody window. You know, don't look at your phones. You know, everyone's gas bagging, that sort of thing. You really need to be scouting the ocean at all times. And again, you're ticking those boxes. But your upwellings are one of the most important features you're going to get when you're trying to find your schools of bait.
You've got some interesting, a little bit off topic, but it's still technically finding fish, just not pelagics. You've got a bit of info from your time doing your blue nose and your sword drops, especially on the commercial side of things, but we'll go into that detail with your canyons and stuff like that a little bit. Just on quite a few people get mixed up on where they're doing their sword drops and where they're doing pooker and blue nose drops, on what side of the hill to drop on with your currents, where your bait's actually going to sit, respective to where you're dropping your baits and stuff like that down. So I'll let you touch into that stuff a little bit.
If you're targeting harpooker and blue nose, A lot of people would think, so in this case, you've got your current going this way. A lot of people would think, okay, the fish are going to be hanging on this side of the seamount, and they're going to be getting all the nutrients and all the bait and that sort of thing that's rushing over the top of that seamount, so they're going to be hanging on that side. That's not the case. Essentially, if they're hanging on that side, they're in the strong current, they're swimming like hell, they're going to starve to death. What happens is, as that upwelling hits that seamount, it gets up to the top, and it actually forms like a little back eddy. So quite often you'll find right on that top edge or just down that slope a bit, you're going to find your blue nose and harpooker. So what you do is when you get to a seamount, so if you're going out to say the rangatira's off Tauranga, when you get out to that seamount, the first thing you do is you do a dummy drift, and if you can, get one of the boys to drop a line down, track your drift on your plotter, and you'll know, right, okay, the current's going this way. Now, generally, we call it Area 1, so generally from North Cape to East Cape, the current runs out to the southwest. So it's coming from the northwest and goes out to the southwest. That's the general current state in Area 1 for probably 60 to 70% of the time. You'll get little variances, but once you've worked out which way your current drift is, you then know which side of the seamount the current's hitting. The fish will be on that side. Now, if you steam around the rangatiras and have a look on your sound, look at that school of fish, I can guarantee you 100% every single time you will find that little haystack of blue nose or that haystack of harpooker just on that leading edge, on the side of that current. And that, again, that's cutting down your time steaming around, guys. So instead of steaming around trying to find the bloody fish, work out your current, and you'll find they're on that face every single time. Yeah. So I work a lot of, I've spent sort of 40 years doing working the seamounts and canyons offshore of New Zealand. I never ever even bother shooting gear on that side. It's just a total waste of time. And I'm a numbers guy. I've shot literally millions of hooks over my career. I wouldn't even bother shooting on that side. Always work out which side the current's going to hit, and that's where you're going to find your fish. It's really crucial. Another way of looking at it, so if you guys are doing, say, swordfish drops, and you're trying to get your swordfish bait into you're looking at the 500 metre line and you're going to wind it up 50 metres or whatever, the biggest thing you're looking for is you want to have that bait in the strike zone for the maximum amount of time. So again, you have to work out what your current's doing. So there's no sense if a current's running this way, there's no sense coming on this end and dropping your bait. As soon as you drop your bait, the current's grabbing that bait, you're up into 250 metres or you're out into 750 metres and you're catching cardinal. The biggest thing is to try and get that bait in the right zone for the right time. But you've got to remember when you're working canyons, the current's getting swirled around by that pathology, so whatever's happening in that bottom structure. And the best way of looking at it is, if you guys visualise going through, say, the Waiweka Gorge or the Kopahikawai or the Karangahape Gorge, you're driving through that canyon, you've got all these ridges and valleys along that mountain range. Now you visualise, instead of a current, look at those canyons and valleys that you're driving through and imagine what that wind's doing as it's going through that. So you're trying to drop your bait. It's like being in a helicopter 500 metres above the ridgeline. You're dropping that bait out of a bloody helicopter and expecting that to land right on that 500 metre line, where you've got all that wind, all those upwellings and all that updrafts and downdrafts. By the time you drop that bait down where you want it to land on that edge, that bait can be 200, 300 metres away from where you've dropped it. So you've got to imagine what's going on. The wind or the current is swirling around those valleys. So it takes a lot of expertise to actually land it where you think it's going to land. So you've got to work out what your currents are doing before you do your drops, and you want to have that bait in the optimum drift time. And you'll know as you drift along. Again, track what you're doing, and you'll know what's going on. So that plays a major part in what's going on.
Yeah. So enough of our little side missions. The last of the traditional techniques, and this is a fun one. A lot of people think you're full of it. On one of the things I'll mention here, but is your glassy, oily patches in your fish life. Pretty basic. Everyone's seen it on a calm day again. When you're out there, you've seen a bus up and stuff like that. There's almost an oil slick across the water. You can see the scales, you can see all the oil from the fish getting hit. The fun one is, if you're in a small boat, you say you can smell it in your big commercial boats, but that's probably the bait you're using. In your smaller boats specifically, you can actually smell the fish. those of you that have smelt it before know exactly what I'm talking about. It's almost like a petrol smell sort of thing. If you come into that sort of area, you get that smell, you see the glassy, oily patch, stay in that area. Every fisherman, especially game fishermen, we've all done it before. Demons to the radio. Sitting there, you know that there's fish there, there's glassy, oily patches, you've come across all the sign, you're marking stuff on the sounder, and you hear Bob's hooked up 2K away. All of a sudden, you've bumped the revs up a little bit, you're running off from the area that you know the fish is in. If you come across stuff like this, where you've seen the oily patch, you've smelt that smell, stay in that area. The fish are there for a reason, that they're gonna be there. If you're coming across the oily patches, coming across that smell, it's only just happened, you've just missed it.
Yep.
Those pelagic fish are still sitting there. Please stay in that area.
Yeah. And it's the same with every now and then you'll see one little skipjack jump, you know, one little bait fish jump. None of those guys travel by themselves. They're always in school. So you might see one fish jump and think, oh, yeah, it's not really happening. There's no gannets and that sort of thing. I'm not seeing a big bust up on the surface. They never travel alone. They always travel in schools. So if you see any bait jumping, you can guarantee you go over that area and sound it, you're going to see it might be a 10-ton school of bait underneath you.
Especially if they're jumping towards your boat.
Yep.
There's no reason a fish should jump towards your boat other than something big is chasing it.
Yep, for sure.
They're always going to jump away as you're pushing through, breaking that surface. They'll jump away from you. You'll see flying fish running away and stuff like that. The amount of times this summer specifically, like the boys will be sitting out the back, bored as hell, watching teasers and stuff like that, and then you'll hear this, oh, look, there's a flying fish. Oh, it's jumping towards us. Bang, one of the riggers goes off. If the fish are jumping towards you, something big's chasing them. That's the last of our sort of traditional techniques. We'll show you how it all ties in towards the end, but we'll start rocking into a bit of the more technical side of things, what TK's spent the last God knows how long staring at. If you've seen photos of his wheelhouse online and stuff like that, it'll be middle of the day. He's got his curtains closed and he's got 15 screens around him, and there's cameras showing him what's 20 metres behind him on the back deck. Instead of looking out the window, he's looking at a computer screen. Absolutely. And then he's got 4 or 5 of these screens showing. So it's pretty amazing when you go through. These images and videos were all taken over about a week and a half period, which shows you just how slow these balls of water actually move. A lot of people think if you've got a warm ball of water here and the current's ripping off in one direction at 5 or 6 knots, that ball of water is going to move along with it. It's actually really slow to move, which TK will go through soon, but it's quite cool as we flick through these images, being able to see how they all marry together with your currents, your sea surface temp, and the chlorophyll and stuff like that.
Yep, so when you're fishing offshore, your currents define everything. So one of the last things I look at is sea surface temp. The first thing I look at is my current. So they effectively are what your sea surface height anomalies are. So your currents are formed by upwellings and downwellings. So where you get an upwelling, you've got all the nutrients coming up from the bottom. That's basically what's forming your ecosystem. So you're looking for your upwellings, and for every action is a reaction. So you've got an upwelling, that water spills off from the side, and then you'll get a downwelling. So it's like a pump. You've got upwellings coming up, bringing all the nutrients up, and then the nutrient poor water is going back down again. You want to find those currents. Now, in this image here, your yellow and red are your stronger currents, and your lighter colours are your weaker currents. You want to stay out of the stronger currents because, again, the pelagic and the baits, you're not going to have a school of bait and a really strong current ripping along. They're going to be looking for a more settled area. And another way of looking at it is if you're into your trout fishing and you're working in a river, you'll see the mainstream of the river pouring through, but you'll have little eddies on the corners where there's a bit of a back current. You generally find your trout are hanging in those back current areas, and it's the same with bait. As your nutrients come up, they come up in your upwellings. So in this image here, this is an upwelling here. There's another upwelling there in blue, and your main body is a downwelling. So you want to be in those areas where the currents converge. So where you get one current going one way and another current going the other way, where those currents converge, that's where you're going to get all your bait generated. So basically your phytoplankton starts to form there. So you want to look for those areas where the currents are a bit slack. You're looking for those back eddies. That's where your life is. So
yeah. That also sort of drives on to the next slide on where your sea surface temp and stuff hits it. So that's what's pulling all your temperature around. Again, we'll go on. The next slide after this is your chlorophyll, which is essentially the starting point for all the sea life. It's the smallest little bit of bait all that sort of stuff that your bigger fish and then your bigger fish are feeding on.
Yep. So, so we've got a sea surface temp here. Remember I was showing you that upwelling in here? Around those edges, you've got your sea surface temp. So everyone thinks, righto, your sea surface temp's the only thing that's going on. Your sea surface temp is held there by your currents. So I get a lot of guys saying, okay, TK's told me to go to this area here. That was 3 days ago. Is that area still current? Is that mark still current? Now, the best way of looking at that is you imagine a cyclone. So a cyclone, on the outside edge of that cyclone, it might be going 150 miles an hour, but the cyclone itself might be only travelling at 2 or 3 miles an hour. You know, it can stay in an area for days.
I fished the same body of water for 2.5 months over summer.
Exactly.
Same little warm spot out of the Alderman, sat there for damn near 2.5 months, and we pulled fish out of it almost every time.
So your current might be generating quite fast in the middle, but that whole body of water might only be moving 1 mile or 2 miles a day. So those sea surface temps will hold in the same area. So I do forecasts for Australia and New Zealand. There's been an eddy off Sydney and there's been an eddy off the east coast of Tasmania. They've been there for 4 months. They have not moved. That same body of water is still there. So if you find an area, there's nothing wrong with going back to that same area in 3 or 4 days. It'll still be holding the same sort of fish. So with your sea surface temps, what you're looking for is these little eddies breaking off the side. So anywhere, instead of getting the main body, anywhere you see a little eddy coming off the side, that's where your bait's going to be holding. So it's out of the main area. It gets into a little area. What happens is the cold water around that area acts like a fence. So you might have this little finger down here. You might have a big patch of bait on the bottom edge of it that will not go out of that into the cold water. So it acts like a fence and corrals that bait into one area. And there's a lot of theories around it, but it does change from area to area. So the general idea is that the fish will hang in the warmer water because it's basically nutrient poor and it's clearer vision. So effectively, they feel safer. If they're in the warmer or clearer water, which is your downwellings, they feel safer there because they can look around. They'll be in that area. They'll go into the cold area, onto the edge of that colder area, grab a bait, and they'll come back and rest in that warmer area. So when you're coming up, you know, right, this is a likely looking patch. I'm going to go and head over there. Don't wait until you get to that area before you put your lures out because they won't be exactly on that area. The pelagics will be around the area. So they'll be coming backwards and forwards into that area to feed. So get your lures out 5 miles before you get there because somewhere there's going to be that convergence zone. And that's what you're looking for every time. You're looking for basically temperature breaks. Wherever you get a sharp temperature break, that's where you're going to find the fish, or you get a sharp a variance in current. You're looking for those convergence zones. The biggest thing you do when you get to those areas, most of your plotters these days have got a feature where, okay, you can track in red or purple or green, but a lot of your plotters these days you can also track with your temperature. So it'll change colours. Starts in the colder temperature it's blue, and as you get into the warmer stuff it starts turning to red. You want to turn that feature on. As you come up to those convergence zones, you'll see the sharp rise or sharp change in colour. And as we said before, start zigzagging around that area and you'll actually mark that convergence zone and you'll know where the fish are. So that's a really important feature.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final image we've got for you is the chlorophyll, which again, you can see where that eddy's sitting and you can see marked out where all the chlorophyll is as well.
Yeah.
Which is, it's essentially your super life. That's where all of the bait fish start feeding. It's where 90% of your fish are actually going to start congregating. Purely on your smaller fish are there, and it's just going to bring in bigger and bigger fish as it builds.
Yep.
It's just, it's really cool to see sort of all the images overlaid with each other just to show that sort of that current ball really ties everything in.
So you go back to the current one first, Cambo. So you can see, remember I was pointing up in this area up here, you've got that blue area there. Obviously that's less current, and as I was saying before, you've got that back eddy effect going. So now you go to your sea surface temp, go back a bit again, Cam. So, yep, you can see those little fingers sticking out there. Now if you go to the chlorophyll, remember I was saying you get those back eddies. Over here you've got a current, the main body's going that way, you've got another body over here going that way, and you've got another current going that way. So you've got all these convergent currents. Yeah. Oh, you've got a pointer. Yeah, so that's that area where you've got opposing currents, you've got slacker currents, and you can see there you've got your chlorophyll, which is your building blocks for your whole ecosystem. So those are the places you're looking for. So again, you go through your checklist. You've found, you start with this before you depart the wharf, right? You've picked an area that's got chlorophyll in the area. You've got opposing currents. You've got a little eddy coming off the main body of warmer water. So you pick that. Once you get out to that area, then you say, shit, there's some dolphins. There's some birds working. There's a glassy patch. Something is just fed in that area. There's a couple of fish jumping. The more of those things you can identify, the more chances you have of finding your pelagic species.
It's amazing having, like, the advancements in technology now are ridiculous. Sort of gone are the days of you leave the wharf and you go, right, Bob caught a fish 20 k's to the right, Johnny caught one 20 k's to the left yesterday, and Bob caught one a few days ago straight out, and you sort of roll the dice on what way are we going to go. The amazing side of this sort of stuff is now you can sit there and go, right, there's a ball of warm water here, the currents are pushing in that direction, we know that that warm water will be pushing through, the bait's going to get sucked down into that one area, which is kind of why I fished the one spot religiously over summer I knew the prevailing current was pulling in and pooling in one spot. I knew there was a little body of warm water there, and it just kept producing. And it's then when you've got your start point, you know that if I head in that direction to roughly that area, somewhere in that area, in that vicinity, we're going to come across all of the other signs that we went through with the traditional stuff. So it gives you a start point. You know that once you get out there, you start looking for your dolphins, start looking for your birds, your oily patches, your upwellings. That's when you start tying it all in, and that just gives you the best opportunity possible to actually catch that pelagic. We've seen it time and time again over summer. People have been asking us for rough marks or where the water's sitting and stuff like that. We had a few competitions where I slipped an SST map out to everyone that was sitting at the competition at the table and stuff like that. 90% of them went out and caught a yellowfin. Again, this season's been ridiculous for yellowfin fishing. We've got the southern bluefin rocking in soon as well. First few have been caught off the Kapiti coast and stuff like that now, a few down south. Stick around. Matt Watson's doing a chat really, really soon on how to catch tuna. It's specifically tailored to that. He's got his rods and reels. He's got all of his lures, his techniques and stuff like that. Stick around for that. But yeah, that really is paramount that you guys sort of sit there and rather than going, game fishing's a bloody expensive sport, let's be honest. Fuel's not cheap. It gives you a rough point to go out, go, right, I know that there's warm water here. I know the current's there. I know the chlorophyll's there. I know where I'm going to start. And that's when you can start going out there and getting a better idea of where everything's sitting. That kind of wraps up what we needed to cover off. Does anyone have any questions or anything like that?
Sweet.
No? Sweet.
Anyone wants to sort of get further down the rabbit hole, just come and see us and we'll spend a couple of hours going through it.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
If you want to look more into detail on the technology side of things as well, pop over and see Mandy and she might do you a deal. All right. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.